Hello, everyone. I'll try to be very quick. First, thank you to Professor Hughes. That was a really great introduction to divestment. And personally, I've been involved in divestment campaigns. I was a student at Yale University not too long ago. So, what am I doing now? My name is Atid, and I'm the Program Associate for the Tri-State Coalition for Responsible Investment. So, to start off, just imagine that you are sitting around a table with a group of nuns and executives from ExxonMobil. That's pretty much what we do. I'm being a little trite, but that's in a way that's how to describe what we do. We started off with the anti-apartheid work, starting in the 1970s actually, along with many other religious denominations, later universities, and the coalition has worked for the past 4 decades to transform leading corporations into forces for human rights and sustainable development. And there's definitely a long way to go before that vision is fulfilled. But along with our partners in the Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility series, which was mentioned by another speaker, and other investors, we've made a lot of progress, and I want to talk to you about that. We call ourselves TriCry for short. At TriCry, climate change has long been one of our main focus areas. But that said, we also work on a lot of other issues, human rights and sustainability, and also kind of corporate governance and the influence of money in politics. So to start off, we are faith-based investors. I'm personally Jewish, but the organization is a coalition of Catholic investors. And as faith-based investors, we put a really strong emphasis in our work on human rights, the protection of the most vulnerable, and the voices of impacted communities. We're committed to a prophetic role, even as we take pragmatic steps forward. And most importantly, our members are committed to using their voices to promote their values, and we believe that almost any company can be transformed for the better. Almost. So I'm just briefly going to describe what socially responsible investment is, because it's a broad field, and it's maybe a little bit mystical to some people. So Professor Hughes did a really great job of describing divestment, which is one of the tools that we have with socially responsible investment, also known as screens. That's when you preemptively say, I don't want this in my portfolio. A lot of investors don't include things like tobacco already. Fossil-free is now becoming the big screen. But I'm going to focus on 2 other aspects, mainly shareholder advocacy and also impact investing for climate solutions. So big picture, shareholder advocacy is when you leverage your position as an investor in a publicly traded company to change corporate policies and practices in support of environmental and social goals. So in practice, what does this look like? And I have here a picture of Quakers sitting in at a PNC bank, and also the resolved clause from a shareholder resolution filed by investors with PNC. So basically what happens is an issue emerges, and investors will reach out to the company that's involved and say, hey, we want to talk about this. Engage in dialogue, usually the first time round, not very productive. Sometimes you'd be surprised. And when it's not, we file a resolution with the company. It'll go on the proxy statement. That's what you get every year. And every person who owns a share in the company votes on that resolution. Thank you. And so after the resolution is voted upon, you'll go back to dialogue with the company. Depending on the vote, they may capitulate, or you may be able to compromise. So just to come back to the PNC example, after many years of resolutions being filed by a coalition of investors, PNC, and pressure from grassroots groups, which was extremely important, PNC has announced that it will stop funding mountaintop removal. More broadly, and this is part of what socially responsible investment can do in a way that grassroots campaigns, because they have to be blunt, and that's exactly what they're supposed to do, we've also gotten PNC to hire dedicated staff to considering climate risk in their lending portfolio, and we're going to continue to work with them over the coming years to hopefully reduce the financed emissions, which is the emissions that they have invested in the companies that they invest in to try and bring down the emissions in our overall economy. And I'll just say also that at the Tri-State Coalition, we focus a lot on Citibank, Goldman Sachs, and Bank of America, where we have a similar resolution. So I'll give a brief historical. We started working on climate change before I was born, and the basic thing that we've been trying to do for all these years is to shift our energy system and move towards sustainable economic models. So I'll just briefly say, this work started with getting companies to even acknowledge there was a problem and to stop funding denial, which unfortunately is still existing in some companies. But as the timeline shows, we've made real progress. Hundreds, if not thousands of companies now measure and disclose their greenhouse gas emissions. Hundreds of companies have set goals to reduce their emissions. In our work, we work particularly with Ford for them to be the first automotive company to acknowledge the risk that climate change posed to their company. They have since set science-based greenhouse gas emission reduction goals that will align them with a 2 degree target for the global climate. It's a start. We're definitely on their back about that. But they've constructively engaged with policy, developing the new fuel economy standards, and they are working on lightweighting hybrid vehicles and other such measures. So there's progress, but as we know, a lot to be done. So very quickly, I'll talk about shareholder advocacy and oil and gas companies, which is a big focus. So a lot of people obviously are divesting, and that's extremely important. At the Tri-State Coalition, we continue shareholder advocacy, not because we don't believe in the divestment approach, but one, because of our faith-based approach to use our voice within companies for change. Two, we're pretty small investors with relatively meager investments in fossil fuel companies regardless. And so I want to highlight some of the things that this work has done, acknowledging the extreme limitations on working with oil and gas companies. Shareholder pressure has helped push BP, Occidental, and ConocoPhillips to all leave ALEC, the conservative group that brought us Stand Your Ground laws and has been pushing against renewable energy at the state level. Shell, BP, and Statoil have all signed on to the World Bank statement on the need to price carbon. BP and Shell recently supported shareholder resolutions requiring vastly improved disclosure on emissions management, carbon asset risk, low carbon research and development, and strategic key performance indicators and executive incentives, as well as their public policy intervention. The resolution received 98% of the vote at the BP annual meeting just last week or 2 weeks ago. Our resolution with ExxonMobil, which has been in the works for 8 years, each year, has garnered about 25% of shareholder votes, and we continue to push the company on the issue of climate change and reducing their greenhouse gas emissions. And this year, the New York City Comptroller filed shareholder resolutions with dozens of oil companies that call on the companies to establish a new bylaw allowing shareholders to propose directors to the board of directors, basically taking the Carl Icahn approach to shareholder advocacy. The other thing is that we can engage on related issues when we still keep our voice within companies. So fracking, we're working hard to get them to disclose what they're putting into the water. Methane emissions reductions, as we know, methane is an extremely important greenhouse gas to get a handle on. And we're more recently have filed resolutions around disclosing more about safety practices for oil trains. Beyond that, we engage with many other sectors and dozens of other companies along with our partners. So I think that's one of the important things about, even if you divest, which is great, and my boss always says, if you're not engaging, you have no business being in fossil fuel companies. There are a lot of other sectors that we need to move to both shift our production and consumption of these fuels. I was going to go into this, but I don't really have time to highlight the work of shareholder advocacy and the palm oil. I'll just say briefly that 96% of palm oil suppliers now have zero deforestation commitments that they're working towards, as well as 20 of the main consumer-facing companies that buy these products and use them in everything you see listed on this slide. And we're continuing that work. And the role of investors has been minor. It's, the Greenpeace and Rainforest Action Network were the ones really behind this. But the investor push at the end was extremely important, especially in the non-consumer facing companies, in the depth of the commitment, extending it to other commodities. We recently had a victory with Arthur's Daniels Midland, which is going to now have a zero deforestation commitment for both palm oil and soybeans. So there are a number of roles that investors can play. Very briefly say that the other side of the coin is to invest in the solutions, and that's the divest, reinvest piece. And there is it's a $1 trillion challenge. Each year we need $1 trillion in investments in clean solutions. And we're working with the big financiers like Citibank, which just announced a $100 billion commitment over the next 10 years to clean energy, and both within our own portfolios to catalyze these markets. This is the very end of the presentation. So we're really wanting to get individuals involved in the work of moving us towards a sustainable, just peace economy that we all want. And I have this quote up here that you can read. I'll read the last part. It's from the legendary community organizer Saul Alinsky. And it says, "There's really no limit to the proxy potential. Pat Moynihan told me in Washington when he was still Nixon's advisor that proxies for the people would mean revolution. They'll never let you get away with it. It will mean revolution, peaceful revolution, and we will get away with it in the years to come." So we're not quite there yet. This chart is showing all the main mutual funds and how they voted on climate resolutions. Some of them are supporting them. A lot of them are not. Vanguard is one that has never once supported a climate change resolution, controls over $3 trillion. To move our economy, we need everyone to be doing the things that I'm going to show you. So invest in socially responsible mutual funds, if you are in mutual funds. Whether or not they're fossil-free, although I'd say go fossil-free, it's just a better investment at this point. And make sure that they're doing shareholder advocacy. There are a number that do this. It's an extremely important work. Talk to your managers and mutual funds about how they vote their proxies. If you don't have much of a say with a mutual fund, but if they hear from their consumers that they want them to be taking this into consideration, they will start to. 3, vote your proxies if you're directly holding any companies in support of these resolutions. If you really want to get involved, file a shareholder resolution. I can talk to you about that, or coordinate with us. And if there's an annual general meeting of a company nearby and you're a stockholder, go to it and express your concerns about social and environmental issues. It makes a difference, even in a small way. And there are 2 other big pieces. Encourage your congregation to get involved in social responsible investment. The Unitarian congregation Shelter Rock in Long Island is very involved. They're a small congregation. They work with the Interfaith Center, and they're leading work on Hormel, one of the biggest agricultural companies. Any congregation can get involved. And leverage your voice as a consumer and as a citizen. Join local organizations. There are a number of great groups, Green America, Rainforest Action Network, Greenpeace, and others that are putting pressure on these companies outside of the boardroom, and that's extremely important. And I'll also put a shout out to the Climate Action New Jersey Facebook group, which I'm a member of, and it's if you're in New Jersey, you should belong to that group. Look it up online. It's a great way to learn. There are dozens of events on the page, including this one. And some resources if anyone's interested, and thank you so much.